Welcome to the channel for another exciting video. Most people who watch our videos are not subscribed, so I kindly ask you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any new content. Your like is essential for YouTube to understand that this content is relevant, so please like, share, and leave your comment. Now, let's get to the story. Clara walked slowly through the dark basement of the antique shop, her footsteps echoing softly on the worn wooden floor. The smell of dust and old wood enveloped her, and the dim light of her flashlight barely illuminated the outlines of the stacked furniture around her. As a restorer of antique furniture, she was used to working with objects that carried stories, but there was something particularly intriguing about this place, as if each item was waiting to reveal a secret. Then her eyes fixated on a framed mirror, covered by a dusty sheet. The frame was ornate, with intricate details that seemed to dance under the flickering light. Clara pulled back the sheet, revealing a glass that looked more like a portal than a mere decorative object. As she looked at her reflection, she felt a shiver run down her spine. Her image appeared distorted, as if a layer of mist obscured the glass. "Wow, this is different," she murmured, leaning in for a closer look. But as she got nearer, Clara's reflection flickered and disappeared, leaving only a shadow in its place. She stepped back, her heart racing. What was that? "It's a cursed mirror, if you believe in superstitions," said a hoarse voice behind her. Clara turned around and saw the antique shop owner, a gray-haired man with tired eyes. "But there are things that should not be unearthed, young lady. Some stories are better left in the past." Clara frowned, intrigued, but her curiosity was stronger than any warning. "I'm a restorer, and this mirror has a unique beauty. I can't just leave it here." The seller watched her with a serious expression, but she refused to be intimidated. What exactly happened to it? The craftsman who made it, Edward Hawthorne, and his family, they disappeared. "No one ever knew what happened," he replied, his voice low, almost a whisper. "They say he tried to capture the essence of people in the glass, as if it were a form of immortality. The mirror may be more tied to your fate than you imagine." Clara felt a chill in her stomach, but the idea of unraveling the mystery fascinated her. "I need to know more. I'm taking it." The seller hesitated, but in a resigned gesture, stepped back. "Be careful, Clara. What you're seeking may not be what you want to find," he warned, as she walked away with the mirror under her arm, her mind buzzing with questions. Back in her small studio, Clara began to clean the mirror, her eager hands brushing the dust off the glass. Each movement revealed more details in the frame, which was adorned with symbols that seemed to dance in the light. But as the dirt disappeared, Clara realized the reflection was not what she expected. She saw strange figures, faces she didn't recognize, whispers of past lives seeming to emerge from the depths of the glass. "This is impossible," Clara murmured, stepping closer. She touched the glass, and her reflection distorted again, as if something was trying to escape. What is happening here? A sudden power outage made the lights flicker, and Clara felt the atmosphere around her change. A sound, like heavy footsteps, echoed in the empty shop. Her heart raced. "Walter," she called, her voice trembling. "Is that you?" Silence, just the sound of her own heart beating. Clara looked back at the mirror, and her reflection was now blurred, as if a mist was gathering on its surface. A shiver ran down her spine, and the feeling that something was about to happen enveloped her. "No, no, no. What are you hiding?" she whispered, feeling increasingly drawn to the mystery the mirror promised to reveal. She stepped back and began to try to decipher the inscriptions on the frame. The letters seemed to change shape, as if dancing before her eyes, forming a code that challenged her to discover its meaning. Determined, Clara decided there was no turning back. The search for the truth had gripped her, and she was willing to follow any clue the mirror had to offer. Clara was in her small workshop, the soft afternoon light filtering through the linen curtains, when she decided it was time to clean the mirror. The piece was beautiful, with a carved wooden frame displaying intricate details. However, the feeling of unease that had accompanied her since she brought it home had not left her. She held a soft cloth in one hand and a bottle of cleaning solution in the other, hesitating for a moment before approaching. "Come on, Clara. It's just a mirror," she murmured to herself, trying to shake off the unease that surrounded her. As she applied the solution, she felt a shiver run down her spine. Her reflection looked different. It wasn't just the lighting, but something deeper. She frowned, leaning in for a better look. What should have been her reflected face now displayed an expression of confusion, as if caught in a moment of emotional outburst. Clara blinked, and the image stabilized. But the feeling of strangeness remained. "Maybe I need a break," she said, trying to laugh off her own creative mind. However, as she cleaned, the surface of the mirror began to shine in a peculiar way. Clara stepped back slightly, her heart racing. "What's wrong with you?" She allowed herself a whisper, as if the mirror could hear and respond. As she continued cleaning, her mind wandered to the antique fair in Savannah, where the first time she saw the mirror had mesmerized her. The feeling of connection enveloped her so much that she remembered losing track of time. A seller, a man with piercing eyes and gray hair, had approached and said, "There are things that should not be unearthed." His words still echoed in her mind. Clara shook her head, trying to dispel the foreboding. "It's just superstition." "Antiques have no power," she repeated to herself. But as she spoke, the light in the room seemed to flicker briefly, and the sound of footsteps echoed in the empty shop. Clara stopped, the cloth slipping from her hands and falling to the floor. "Walter," she called, hoping her friend was nearby, but the only response she received was silence. She moved closer to the back door of the store, listening intently. The atmosphere was steeped in palpable tension, and a feeling of being watched surrounded her. "It's just my imagination," Clara decided aloud, trying to convince herself and ignore the growing sensation that there was something more she could not see. She turned to the mirror, her reflection now once again stable, but a fleeting shadow seemed to pass behind her. Clara turned quickly, but there was nothing. The unease grew within her. "Maybe I should stop here," she thought, but curiosity held her back. Determined, Clara decided to investigate further. She noticed that as she cleaned the frame, some inscriptions seemed to have revealed themselves. They were symbols she did not recognize, but they glowed with a soft and hypnotic light. "What are you hiding?" she asked, gently touching the frame. As soon as her finger brushed against the symbols, an intense chill coursed through her body. Clara recoiled, dazed. She was about to step away when a new noise made her stop. A sudden crash resonated from the back of the store, followed by a total blackout. The darkness was accompanied by the feeling that something was about to happen. Clara, now fully alert, turned on her flashlight, the light flickering as she cautiously walked toward the noise. "Walter, if you're playing a prank, this isn't funny," she shouted, her voice echoing in the void. But in response, only the deadly silence surrounded her. Fear began to seep into her thoughts, bubbling in her stomach. Clara knew there was something in this store, something that connected her to this mirror and all its strangeness. The truth was close. But what did it mean for her? With wavering courage, she braced herself to face whatever was lurking in the shadows. Clara was absorbed in her work, the afternoon light filtering through the windows of the workshop as she meticulously examined the enigmatic mirror. The ancient frame, covered in dust and traces of time, seemed to pulse with a mystery that begged to be unraveled. It was during this careful inspection that she noticed something peculiar, a small opening at the base of the mirror. Drawn by an inexplicable force, Clara knelt down and, using her nails, began to dig into the crevice. Her fingers found something thick and dusty, and upon removing it, she realized it was a diary, its pages yellowed and worn. With her heart racing, Clara flipped through the pages of the diary, which, according to the notes, had belonged to Edward Hawthorne, the famous craftsman. The letters, still legible, revealed deep and anguished thoughts. "The mirror is more than an object," Edward wrote on one of the pages. "It holds secrets that should not be revealed." Clara was intrigued. What did he mean by that? As she read further, she came across a passage that mentioned his wife, Margaret, and a tragic event that had changed their lives forever. "Since the day Margaret disappeared, I feel that a part of my soul is trapped in this mirror. If I do not find a way to free her, I will be doomed to live in this shadow." "Margaret," Clara murmured, almost as if the name had a tangible weight in the air. The woman's disappearance seemed inextricably linked to Edward's fate, and a chill ran down her spine. She stood up, the diary in hand, and decided she needed to know more. The city of Charleston had a local library filled with stories and secrets that could help her understand what had happened to Edward and his family. At the library, Clara searched for any mention of Edward Hawthorne. The books were old and smelled of mildew, but that did not discourage her. She flipped through volumes about the city's history, and after some time, found a book dedicated to local craftsmen. Hawthorne, Edward, she read aloud, her eyes widening as the story unfolded before her. Edward Hawthorne, a master craftsman known for his masterpieces, mysteriously disappeared along with his wife and children in 1892. Despite several searches, their bodies were never found. "This can't be all," Clara whispered, frustrated. The mystery seemed deeper than she had imagined. What had happened to the Hawthorne family? And why was the mirror connected to these events? As she got lost in her thoughts, an older man interrupted her. It was Walter, a regular at the library, known for his vast knowledge of local history. "Can I help you, young lady?" Walter asked, with a curious look. Clara hesitated but soon decided to tell him about the mirror and the diary. Walter listened attentively, his eyes narrowing as she spoke. "Edward Hawthorne. I know that story," he said, his tone grave. "There were rumors when I was a child. They said he had a special talent, something that went beyond woodworking. Some believed he had made a pact to achieve immortality, that his creations were, in some way, alive. But that's just a legend, right?" Clara questioned, trying to push away the fear that was beginning to grow inside her. "It could be, but I've seen strange things. When I was younger, I heard stories about the mirror. People said that anyone who looked into it could see not just their reflection, but fragments of lost souls, as if the mirror were a doorway to another world." Walter hesitated for a moment, as if weighing his words. "If you found the mirror, Clara, you need to be careful. There are things that should not be unearthed." Walter's words echoed in her mind as Clara left the library. The mirror was more shrouded in mystery than ever, and as she walked back home, uncertainty and curiosity consumed her. The fate of Edward and Margaret Hawthorne was still in the shadows, and Clara was determined to bring them to light, even if it meant facing the darkest secrets they held. Clara was completely absorbed in her work, the shop lights flickering slightly as night fell. The mirror, now clean and gleaming, seemed to have its own aura, a presence that watched her as she moved. The desire to restore it to its former glory was strong, but the feeling that something was wrong accompanied her like a shadow. As she approached the piece once again, a shiver ran down her spine. The reflection she saw seemed, in some way, distorted. She squinted, trying to understand what she was seeing. On the surface of the mirror, her reflection was no longer just an image. There was something more. "Why are you like this?" Clara murmured to herself, watching how her image seemed to change under the dim light. Instead of just seeing her face, she realized her reflection was twisting, as if struggling to free itself from some invisible prison. This is not possible. She quickly stepped back, her heart racing. The mirror seemed to pulse, and with each passing second, Clara felt that something else was hiding behind the gleaming surface. Determined to understand what was happening, she began to clean the frame, trying to discover if there was some hidden mechanism that could be causing this effect. "It's just a mirror," she said, trying to convince herself. "An old mirror. Nothing more." But, upon touching the frame, her skin tingled, and a wave of cold enveloped her. Clara recoiled, staring intently at the mirror. That night, as the wind howled outside, Clara decided she would go to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. She tossed and turned in bed, restless. Strange dreams began to take over her mind, images of places she had never seen, faces of people she had never known. And amid all of this, a familiar figure was calling her. "Clara." The voice was soft but full of desperation. "Clara, help me." She woke up with a start, breathing heavily. The echo of the voice still reverberated in her ears. It was a dream, but it felt so real. Clara got up and, as if guided by an invisible force, made her way to the mirror. The moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating the polished surface, and for a brief moment she saw Edward Hawthorne, the craftsman mentioned in the journal, in her reflection. He looked distressed, as if trapped in a maze of pain. Edward, Clara whispered, unsure if she was dreaming or awake. Are you there? The image of Edward vanished, but the feeling that he was still there enveloped her. Clara felt an irresistible urge to touch him, to reach the connection that seemed so close. She extended her hand and touched the cold glass. The reflection watched her, but now there was something more. A shadow loomed behind her, a presence that seemed to observe every movement. Who's there? Clara asked, and her voice trembling with fear. She turned quickly, but the shop was empty, only the echo of her own voice responding. As she tried to compose herself, a sound of footsteps echoed in the shop. Clara turned toward the mirror, and what she saw made her heart stop. The mysterious figure she had perceived earlier was now right behind her, its expression dark and piercing. Whatever it was not there to be ignored. You shouldn't be here, the figure said, its voice low and heavy with warning. Luring them out of the mirror is not what you really want. Clara blinked, stunned. What do you know about this? What's happening? You don't understand, the figure replied, the tension in the air intensifying. Some truths are better left buried. The mirror is a portal, and opening that portal can come at a cost. Clara felt the chill of the warning. I need to know the truth. I can't just stand by while Edward and his family are trapped here. The figure hesitated, but Clara could feel the determination growing within her. The mystery called to her, and she would not back down now. Clara was absorbed in her thoughts as she studied the mirror, her delicate hands caressing the ancient frame. The inscriptions she had discovered earlier still glowed strangely, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper hidden there. What had Edward Hawthorne really done? What happened to his wife, Margaret? On an impulse, Clara turned to Walter, who was watching her from the other side of the room, a serious look on his face. Walter, you can't tell me there's no more information about Edward. What do you know about the mirror? Why is it so special? Walter hesitated, looking at the floor as if the answers were there. Finally, he responded, his voice carrying a weight that Clara couldn't understand. Edward believed that the mirror had the power to trap souls. He thought he could achieve immortality through it. Clara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. What do you mean by trapping souls? That's madness. She stood up, agitated by the revelation. I thought so too, Walter said, his voice lower. But there were rumors, Clara. He created the mirror with that intention, and it seems he succeeded. When people disappeared, reflections of them started appearing in the mirror, as if they were trapped inside. A chill ran down Clara's spine. So, you're saying that the souls of the disappeared people are in the mirror? What does that mean for me? Walter looked into her eyes, the seriousness reflected in his expression. It means you need to be careful. Edward and Margaret weren't the only ones to disappear. The mirror might be connected to more people than you think, and if you keep investigating it, you might end up attracting the attention of something that cannot be controlled. Clara took a deep breath, trying to process the enormity of Walter's words. But I can't stop now. I need to find out the truth. I feel like I'm connected to this somehow. The connection might be more dangerous than you think, he warned, shaking his head. When I was young, I saw something inexplicable. A friend of mine disappeared, and it was as if the mirror had absorbed his essence. I saw him there, reflected, but it wasn't him. It was a shadow, something distorted. I'll never forget the look in his eyes, nor the desperation in them. You saw that? Clara asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and compassion. How can you live with that? I was a fool, Walter replied, his expression darkening. I let curiosity guide me. I don't want you to make the same mistake. If Edward truly trapped souls, you risk becoming one of them. Clara bit her lip, her thoughts swirling like a whirlwind. But what if I can free them? What if the mirror can be repaired? I can't just ignore this. Edward and Margaret deserve to be found. Walter fell silent for a moment, assessing the determination shining in Clara's eyes. You're stubborn, Clara. That's admirable. But you need to understand that what's at stake is real. The mysterious figure you saw in the shop. I recognized her from somewhere. She could be a descendant of Edward, someone who wants to protect the family's dark legacy. Protect or control, Clara retorted, a new fire rising within her. Both. Be careful, Clara. Stay alert. Don't trust anyone, not even yourself, when it comes to the mirror. It has a way of manipulating people, making them forget the truth. With a knot in her stomach, Clara looked back at the mirror. The glow of the inscription seemed to pulse, as if the mirror were alive and aware of her presence. Walter's words echoed in her mind, but the need to uncover the truth was stronger. She couldn't back down now. Clara and Walter found themselves in the darkest corner of the shop, where the dim light of the lamp flickered, casting shadows that seemed to dance around them. The atmosphere was heavy, laden with a mystery that enveloped them like a thick fog. Clara held the mirror with both hands, her eyes fixed on the inscriptions that shone on the frame, while Walter scanned the space around them, as if expecting something or someone to appear at any moment. "Are you sure we can trust this code?" Clara asked, concern evident in her voice. It could be the key to understanding all of this, but what else might be hidden? Walter took a deep breath, his gaze lost in the letters that seemed to come alive under the dim light. If Edward truly believed that the mirror could trap souls, then what we find here might be more than just simple objects. We need to figure out what the frame is trying to tell us. Clara nodded, still hesitant. The diary mentioned a key. Do you think it could be here, inside the mirror? It's possible, Walter replied, moving closer. Let's see what we can find. With a careful motion, Clara began to run her fingers over the inscriptions, deciphering the symbols that seemed to weave together in a pattern. Meanwhile, Walter stepped back a bit, examining the back of the mirror where the wood was worn and covered in dust. "Hey, look at this," Walter exclaimed, his voice echoing in the silent room. He pointed to a small crack in the wood, almost imperceptible. "I think I've found something." Clara stepped closer, her heart racing. "What is it?" "It looks like a key, but not like the ones we know. It's more like a mechanism. If we can open it, maybe we'll discover more about this place." Carefully, Walter began to work on the crack, pressing and turning cautiously. The sound of a click echoed, and a small part of the frame opened, revealing a hidden compartment. Clara could hardly contain her excitement as dust swirled in the air, illuminated by the light of the lamp. Inside was a small iron key, adorned with intricate details that seemed to tell its own story. "We did it. This could lead us to something important," Clara said, taking the key with trembling hands. Its weight was symbolic, as if she were holding the hope of solving the mystery. Walter looked at Clara, his eyes shining with determination. "Let's see where this key leads us. The secret room Edward mentioned must be nearby." Clara nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Okay, but we need to be quick. The atmosphere here is heavy, and I feel like we are being watched." As they moved, Clara couldn't shake the feeling of the mirror weighing on her shoulders. It was as if it were alive, pulsing with an energy that both attracted and terrified her at the same time. She hesitated, looking at the distorted reflection still appearing in the glass, remembering how her image seemed to change with every moment. "Walter, have you ever stopped to think that maybe we should stop? What we are about to do could have terrible consequences." "I know, Clara, but we have to try. Edward and his wife deserve for the truth to be uncovered," he replied, his voice steady despite the uncertainty hanging in the air. "And you also need to understand your connection to all of this." With one last glance at the mirror, Clara turned and followed Walter, guided by the dim light of the flickering lamp. They approached a wooden door that seemed to have been forgotten by time, and the key Clara held seemed to vibrate in her hand, as if eager to be used. "Here," Walter said, placing his hand on the doorknob. "It's time to find out what is hidden behind this door." Clara held her breath as Walter inserted the key into the lock. A low click reverberated through the room, and the door slowly creaked open, revealing a secret room that seemed to have remained untouched for years, covered in dust and shadows. The walls were adorned with Edward's artwork, but something else caught her attention. Strange objects that seemed to pulse with a life of their own, almost as if waiting for someone to set them free. "This is surreal," Clara murmured, her eyes wide. "What are we going to find here?" Walter looked around, the tension rising. "I hope the truth, but we may not be alone." An immediate and palpable sense of danger enveloped the space, as if something dark was about to be revealed. Clara and Walter exchanged glances, knowing that uncovering what was hidden could change everything. Clara was frozen, the letter in her hands trembling as the revelation hit her like a lightning bolt. She was a distant descendant of Edward Hawthorne, the craftsman whose life and tragedy were intertwined with the enigmatic mirror that now occupied her shop. The secret room still reverberated with the tension of the moment. Walter, beside her, seemed to absorb the gravity of the discovery, his gaze fixed on Clara's face, which now reflected a mix of disbelief and determination. "It's true, Clara," Walter said, his deep voice echoing in the dim light. "When I learned of your connection, I couldn't find the courage to tell you. I feared it could change everything between us." Clara took a deep breath, trying to process the avalanche of emotions that flooded her. "You knew. Why didn't you tell me before? This could have changed everything we've lived through until now." She gestured, frustration etched on her face. "If I am part of this, if Edward is my ancestor, maybe that explains the bond I feel with the mirror. But what about the mysterious figure? What does it want?" Walter hesitated, his expression darkening. "It wants to protect the Hawthorne family legacy at all costs. What you are about to face is not just a mystery, it's a curse that has dragged on for generations." Edward believed his mirror could trap souls, and he was right. Freeing them could have devastating consequences. The tension between the two was palpable. Clara knew the truth was within reach, but every time she got closer, the shadow of danger grew more intense. "I can't back down now, Walter. If I'm part of this, I need to understand. I can't let this curse continue to affect other lives." Walter looked at her, his eyes reflecting concern and admiration. "And what if the truth is darker than you imagine? Clara, you don't know the mysterious figure. It may be more dangerous than you think. I can't live with this weight, Walter. If there's anything I can do to help Edward and Margaret, I have to try." Clara felt a wave of determination rising within her. "I can't ignore this connection. I need to set them free." The mysterious figure, which had until then remained in the shadows, stepped forward. Its face was a mask of despair and fury. "You don't understand what you're doing, Clara." The voice was deep, reverberating in the room. "Freeing Edward and Margaret means resurrecting a past that must remain buried. They are not just lost souls. They are the roots of a dark legacy." Clara faced the figure, her heart racing. "If they are trapped here, I can't leave them. The truth needs to be revealed, even if it means risking my own life." The figure hesitated, anger mingling with a glimpse of sadness. "You don't know what it means to carry this burden. Edward and Margaret were not just victims. They made choices, and those choices had consequences." Walter intervened, his voice firm. "Clara, listen. You don't have to do this alone. We can uncover the truth together, without risking what we have. What you are about to do could change everything, and we don't know what will happen." "I can't walk away now," Clara insisted, her eyes fixed on the mysterious figure. "If Edward and Margaret are here, I need to give them the chance to be free. I can't ignore what I feel." The mysterious figure looked at her, a mix of desperation and reluctance in its gaze. "Doing this could destroy you. Are you sure you are willing to pay that price?" Clara took a deep breath, her determination unwavering. "Yes, I am willing. This is the only way to end this cycle of pain." A heavy silence fell over the room as the past and present collided in a decisive moment. Walter watched, fearing what could come next, but knowing that Clara was determined to face whatever lay ahead. Clara felt increasingly enveloped by the mystery of the mirror. The secret room, filled with strange and fascinating objects, pulsed with an almost tangible energy. Each piece seemed to tell a story, but Clara's attention was entirely focused on the mirror. Her reflection, once clear, was now cloudy, as if the memories it held were trying to break free. While examining the ornate frame, Clara noticed a small compartment, almost imperceptible, hidden behind one of the ornaments. With her heart racing, she crouched down to investigate. "Walter, come here," she called, her voice laden with anticipation. Walter approached, the expression on his face reflecting a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "What is it?" he asked, watching as Clara pressed the mechanism that opened the compartment. A soft click resonated in the air, and the hidden section opened, revealing yellowed and time-worn letters. Clara pulled one out, feeling the texture of the old paper between her fingers. "These letters may hold the answers we are looking for," she murmured. her eyes shining with hope. Walter peeked over Clara's shoulder, and his expression shifted from curiosity to concern. But what if this is dangerous? The mirror has already brought us so many problems. We need to know the truth, Walter. If Edward and Margaret are really trapped here, we must help them. Clara took a deep breath and began to read the first letter. The words were written in careful handwriting, but the emotion behind them was evident. My dear Margaret, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means that fate has become darker than I could have imagined. The mirror, the masterpiece I created, is not just an object of beauty. It holds deep secrets, and if not controlled, it can bring destruction. What I did was out of love, but now I fear I have imprisoned not just your image, but our souls as well. Walter looked at Clara, his face pale. Was he aware of what the mirror could do? Yes, Clara replied, her voice trembling. He was trying to protect you. She turned the page and read on. If I cannot control the power of the mirror, know that our family may never see the light of day again. It feeds on emotions, on memories, and I fear that those who gaze into it will be consumed by their own shadows. Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. Walter, this is terrifying. The mirror really can trap souls. I can't believe this is true, Walter said, shaking his head. What are we doing here? We should get out and warn someone. No, Clara insisted, determination in her voice. If we stop now, Edward and Margaret will be trapped forever. They need us. She turned to the mirror, which now seemed to pulse as if it were alive. Edward, we are here. We will help you. At that moment, the mirror began to shine brightly, and images started to dance across its surface. Clara and Walter watched, fascinated and terrified, as scenes from the past unfolded before their eyes. Clara saw Edward and Margaret, happy and in love, in a time before the torment, but soon, happiness turned to despair, and the image of Margaret disappeared, leaving Edward alone and anguished. Look, Walter whispered, pointing at the mirror. He is pleading for help. Edward, trapped between worlds, seemed to look directly at Clara. Please, he whispered, his voice echoing like a lament. Free us. The mirror. It cannot go on like this. Clara felt a wave of compassion and determination. We will free you, Edward. We won't let you and Margaret suffer any longer. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she leaned toward the mirror, seeking a way to liberation. The glow intensified, and the feeling that something great was about to happen enveloped the room. But Clara knew that this moment was just beginning. The mirror, with all its secrets and mysteries, was about to reveal even more than she could imagine. Clara was paralyzed in front of the mirror, her heart racing. The coldness of the glass seemed to intensify as Edward and Margaret's voices echoed in her mind, pleading for freedom. The atmosphere was charged with tension, as if the very space around her was holding its breath. With a hesitant gesture, she approached the hidden compartment, her hand trembling as she prepared to free the trapped souls. Are you sure about this, Clara? Walter asked, concern etched on his face. He stepped closer, as if doubt held him back. Releasing these souls could have terrible consequences. I can't leave them here, Walter, Clara replied, her determination mingling with a touch of fear in her voice. They deserve peace. And I can't live knowing that I'm tied to this without doing anything. Walter glanced at the mirror, where the shadows of Edward and Margaret seemed to writhe, pleading for help. But what if this means the end for you? What if the mirror doesn't let you out? I want to take that risk, Clara said, her voice firm. If I have to face the consequences, so be it. Walter hesitated, but seeing Clara's courage, he knew he couldn't leave her alone. Then let's do this together, he declared, running a hand through his hair, trying to organize his thoughts. What do we need to do? Clara took a deep breath and began to search for the mechanism of the compartment. With a careful movement, she pressed a small part of the mirror's frame. A click echoed, and the secret door opened, revealing a set of yellowed and dusty letters. Clara carefully took them, her heart racing. The letters were filled with emotions and secrets, and each seemed to pulse with its own energy. This is all they left behind, Clara whispered, her eyes shining. If I can free them, maybe we can break this curse. She began to read aloud. Dear Edward, if you are reading this, It means that darkness has finally taken hold of us. Margaret's words reverberated in the room, and Clara felt a wave of sadness and compassion. Walter, beside her, watched the transformation on Clara's face, the empathy growing with each word. "Clara," he started, but she wouldn't let him finish. "Wait," Clara exclaimed, feeling the energy of the mirror shift. It began to shine brightly, and the voices of the two artisans became clearer, closer. "I'm almost there." Suddenly, the mirror began to vibrate violently. The surface distorted, as if it were about to shatter. Clara felt a wave of cold envelop her, and the letters began to fly, as if a storm were forming inside the glass. "Clara, this isn't right," Walter shouted, trying to pull her away. "We need to get out now." "No," Clara shouted back, fighting against the force pulling her toward the mirror. "I can't give up on them. I'm so close." And then, in an act of desperation and courage, Clara reached out toward the mirror, touching the cold surface. "I free you," she declared, her voice echoing in the room. "I break the curse." The moment her hand touched the glass, a blinding flash filled the space. Clara felt a wave of energy surge through her body, and the images of Edward and Margaret began to manifest before her, their ethereal figures forming from the light. Finally, freedom, Edward's voice whispered, filled with gratitude and pain. Margaret approached, her gaze soft yet piercing. "You have no idea what you've done for us." As the souls detached from the mirror, an invisible force began to pull Clara back, as if the mirror itself were trying to hold her. Walter, realizing the danger, grabbed her arm. "Clara, no, you can't let yourself be taken." "I won't," Clara replied, struggling against the pressure. "I can't." Then, in an act of love and sacrifice, Walter found an object in his pocket, a family heirloom he had always carried. "If this can save you," he thought, and without hesitation, he threw it toward the mirror. The amulet hit the surface, and in an instant, a wave of energy spread. The mirror began to deteriorate, cracks appearing on the surface as Edward and Margaret's souls were freed. Clara felt a wave of relief and sadness at the same time, knowing she was making the right choice, but fearing what it meant for her own life. "Walter," she cried, desperate. "Go, Clara. Save yourself," he replied, a sad smile on his face. "I can't leave you here. Go." And at the moment the souls were finally released, a wave of light flooded the shop, and Clara felt herself being pulled out, free from the weight of the past, but without the friend who had sacrificed himself for her. The day was radiant in Charleston, and Clara's shop radiated renewed energy. The mirror, now free from its dark bindings, occupied a prominent place in the window, reflecting the sunlight splendidly. The details of the frame, which had once seemed to carry a weight of mystery and curse, now sparkled with new life. Clara watched the movement outside as a small crowd gathered in front of the shop, drawn by the beauty of the mirror. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" a customer said, stopping to admire the reflection of the blue sky on the mirror's surface. Clara smiled, a smile that carried both relief and joy. "Yes, it seems like it has finally found its place," she replied, her voice vibrating with emotion. The woman winked at Clara before entering the shop, and the restorer felt a warmth in her heart as she realized how much the mirror was attracting people. Throughout the day, Clara received compliments and questions about the mirror's origin. She felt happy to share the story, but always with a touch of mystery. "This mirror has a rich history, wrapped in secrets and redemption," Clara would say, gesturing to the object. "It is not just a decoration, it is a testament to love and sacrifice." As the sunlight began to set, Clara sat in a chair in the shop, admiring the mirror. The surface seemed to glow in an almost ethereal way. She leaned in, observing her reflection, and for a moment she thought she could see Edward and Margaret there, as if they were smiling at her. "Thank you," she murmured, feeling a wave of gratitude. "I hope you are at peace now." It was then that Clara noticed a small envelope falling from the mirror's compartment, as if it had been intentionally left there. Curious, she picked up the envelope, and upon opening it, found a handwritten letter. The paper was old, but the handwriting was clear and elegant. "Clara," the letter began, "if you are reading this, It means that I have finally been freed. Thank you for your courage. You have not only brought light back to my legacy, but you have also brought life to something that was lost for a long time. With tears in her eyes, Clara read Edward's words, feeling connected to him in a way she never imagined was possible. You are more than just a restorer. You are part of our story now, and I will always be by your side, watching and cheering for you. She looked again at her reflection, and for a moment, what she saw surprised her. The smile that formed on her lips was genuine, and her reflection seemed more vibrant, as if it carried the essence of all those who had been touched by the story of the mirror. In a whisper, Clara said, I don't know what the future holds, but I promise to honor your story. With a light heart, Clara decided it was time to share more than just the story of the mirror. She wanted to tell everyone about Edward and Margaret, about the love that endured through time and tragedy. Let's create a space in the store where people can learn more about them, she thought. I need everyone to know that their story deserves to be remembered. As night fell and the store lights began to glow softly, Clara looked back at the mirror. A special glow emanated from its surface, and she could swear she saw Edward's reflection, smiling at her, as if saying that her journey was just beginning. I'm ready, Clara declared, determined. Let's tell this story together. And so, with a new purpose and a new vision, Clara prepared for what was to come, knowing that the mirror was not just an object, but a portal to a past that could finally be set free. So, what did you think of this story? Your opinion is essential for us to improve our content. Write what you thought in the comments and remember to subscribe and like this video. Thank you for your attention and see you in the next video.